Back in the day, Nintendo Power was your go-to source to figure out what was new, what was hot, and compare games to one another to figure out which one you should spend that hard-earned allowance money on at the store. But what if you didn't like magazines? What if you didn't like all those colorful pages with fancy images littered throughout? Well, don't worry, because Jeff Rovin's got you covered. Novels, Tom Clancy stories, books about TV shows and movies, he just seemed to do it all and somehow managed to pump out like 5 books a year in the 80s and 90s. So naturally, he also found his way into discussing video games as well, and that's how you get these books called How to Win at Nintendo by There He Is Down There. And these are what we're going to be looking at today. This is the expanded edition of the original release being in 1988 and this one being 1989. And as you can see, it's just all text, no pictures. So this is a book you could pull off the shelf and, say you didn't know about a game because obviously it was kind of harder to just look things up back then. But, want to know about Jackal, just kind of read about it and see if it's something for you. Or, of course, if you already owned it, there would be tips and tricks in here as well, which might be able to help you throughout. And today I want to look at the collection of books that Jeff Rovin released in regards to Nintendo and see just what kind of oddities are in there. So the first review that you hit in the first book is Alpha Mission, and looking at this game today, and especially if you play it, you're not going to think that this ranks very high at all in regards to the NES library as a whole. However, at the end of each entry in the book, he rates games based on 3 different categories: challenge, graphics, and sound effects. Yeah, sound effects, not even just like sound overall, but the literal sound effects that things make. When it comes to Alpha Mission, he gave challenge an A, graphics a B+, and sound effects a B+. And again, it just kind of shows the age of the book in a sense. It was earlier on in the NES days. You had to take what you could get, but just keep that in mind as we're reviewing the rest of the books. Here's another classic game, Deadly Towers, one that's quite infamous online. Not as much discussed these days, but was certainly torn to shreds quite a bit back in those earlier days when retro games were all the rage. Jeff Rovin gives challenge an A, graphics a D+, understandably, but sound effects also get an A? Have you heard the sound effects in Deadly Towers? But again, just an odd category all around to include, I think, when ranking games. Never fear though, because there's not just meme quality games in this book. Naturally, he reviewed some hot titles as well, such as Contra. Let's see what he gave this one. We got challenge A, graphics A, and sound effects a C. Contra, according to Jeff Rovin, has worse sound effects than Deadly Towers. Again, what is even the purpose of this category? Who is ever going to buy a game based on the sound effects? Mega Man, this will be sure to set things right. The player can choose to battle the 6 humanoids in any order, 1 or 2 player options. In the 1-player mode at the game's end, you can start all over, or you can continue at the Empire where you died without losing any powers you may have acquired from previous forays. In the 2-player mode, the player can continue one another's game or play individual games on alternating turns. Well, that's not true. Mega Man's not 2 players. This book is full of lies. Unless there's some secret 2-player mode that I don't know about. But otherwise, yeah, be careful what you're reading in these books, apparently. But yeah, that's a little bit of a dive into what it looks like to read one of these. No pictures, no flashy graphics, you're getting text on a page, and hopefully that kind of leads you to make the correct purchase or helps you in those games that you already own. Naturally though, every great book needs a sequel, so here we got How to Win at Nintendo Games #2, and you even got Ghostbusters in this one. Whoa, what's Jeff Rovin got to say about that? He gives challenge a D+. Now it's a little bit confusing because it's like he had been giving high letter grade challenge levels to games which were difficult. So does he not think that Ghostbusters is difficult? One thing that the books also include in some articles is a par category when it tells you what the average player should be able to achieve when playing this game. And for Ghostbusters, it says the average player will be able to get up the 22 floors of Zool's headquarters and essentially beat the game because it ends at the top of that after a brief boss battle. According to Jeff Rovin, you suck at video games if you can't beat Ghostbusters. Let that sink in for a minute. I don't know. Maybe it was just me. I think we streamed it for like 4 hours and beat it that one night, but it's pretty tedious, I have to admit. For the rest of it, though, he gives a B- to the graphics, which, have you looked at this game? It's just gray and white squares the whole time. And sound is a B+ as a result of there being a nifty recreation of the Ghostbusters theme that doesn't even sound that good and is literally the only song that plays from the beginning of the title screen to the very end. Yeah, maybe Jeff Rovin's not the kind of guy you want to be listening to with comments like that on Ghostbusters, but hey, it can't be perfect every time, and that's what you get from the sequel book. He wasn't stopping there, though, as there's How to Win at Nintendo Games number 3. I guess it makes sense, make them a trilogy of books. You're getting into later in the NES's life now, about 1991 for this one. Doesn't mean that every single review is like games released that year. Sometimes he'd go back and review some older ones as well that weren't featured in his previous books. Even mentioning in the introduction here that most games start you off with 3 lives. You have to work with 3 controllers to play the joystick A and B buttons. I don't know, I feel like that one's a little bit of a stretch there, Jeff. There are 3 games in the Super Mario Bros. Series, although the 3rd one isn't out in the US yet. And now, to get the 1990s off to a rip-roaring start, there are 3 volumes of How to Win at Nintendo Games. So yeah, this was like a yearly thing for him, and why not, right? Nintendo was all the rage, but again, more tips. But for Jeff, that just wasn't enough. But now we have How to Win at Nintendo Games number 4, released in 1991, naturally focusing on some of the games released more around that time, including a massive feature for Star Tropics. At over 20 pages long, it essentially goes over the entire game, each kind of level, giving you a brief kind of text description of what it is you should do, although, it can never really go into the depth of something like Nintendo Power could. But let's see what kind of ratings it gets. It gets Challenge A, Graphics B, Sound Effects B, with great water effects, I guess when you're diving in the submarine, and Simulation B. And also noted at the end there is that one serious complaint: if you've advanced far in any level, you start way too far back again once you've lost all your lives. Give us a break, Nintendo. I mean, this is from the guy who thought that every kid should be able to beat Ghostbusters with like no effort. So I don't know what Jeff Rovin's thinking, but he said pretty good things about Star Tropics, so I'll let it slide. Jeff Rovin also decided to kind of, just tackle individual series, go a little bit more focused, and in this book he looks at Super Mario Bros. Games, which is Mario 1, 2, and 3, as well as Super Mario Land, and even some text about Dr. Mario in there. Sports games as well were on Jeff's radar, and in this book right here, it's all about different Nintendo sports games, and some of these games were actually covered in the other books we looked at, but that doesn't mean that the reviews are identical. They've actually been rewritten, probably just kind of the text swapped around, but it is nice to see that at least, they put some effort into making something a little different. Although one thing I noticed about this book is that the text is actually way bigger compared to the other books, so it's like, they really kind of tried to pad it, make it the same size as the other ones, but it looks like you're getting a little bit less bang for your buck with the sports games book. And of course, once the Super Nintendo came out, Jeff had to grab a piece of that pie, and this one features a 50-page section dedicated to Super Mario World. So yeah, if you're like really stuck finding the secret exit or something, hopefully Jeff's description can lead you through it, because yeah, it essentially covers every single level, and yeah, just naturally got in on that Super Nintendo pie as well. The last book we're going to be looking at today is this one from Jeff Rovin's Game Master series. These were released a little later on, this one in 1994, and about Super Nintendo games. One notable thing about the Game Master books is that they include ratings, as it says parents were writing in wondering if games were suitable for their children or not, so they kind of wanted that to be pointed out, even though he is absolutely against censorship and such. This would have been around the time when the Genesis and Mortal Kombat and all that were kind of raising questions and concerns about violence in video games, so they kind of just put a violence rating at the end of each category. Instead of there being a challenge and a graphics and a sound effects thing, now it's all about if there's any of that violence, so NG is non-graphic. And let's get some different. Most Super Nintendo games are going to be non-graphic. Like, let's see, what can we do? C, C, I think, is like for cartoon violence, which was always such a weird thing to point out to me. Like, does anyone really care if cartoon violence is a thing? But I guess there must be some people out there. But yeah, that's my collection of Jeff Rovin books. There are a lot of them, more than are actually even here. These are just kind of ones I've picked up at stores over the years, with the original 2 actually being owned by my parents before I was even born. So yes, people actually were buying these, and that's why I guess he made so many of them. But they're just kind of cool to look through these days. It's not flashy like Nintendo Power, but back then, if you wanted to know about a game before you bought it, this was kind of the perfect book to buy, read through it, maybe pick out a few you like, so you know that your money is going towards a game that you're hopefully going to enjoy. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on them down below if you've ever read them yourself. But thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. I hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks and take care.